chairs, distinguished Congress guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. It's a real honor to be invited to speak at this prominent event, gathering quality professionals from all over the world. India is a significant trade partner of Sweden, with an important share of trade in industrial products such as electrical appliances, telecom equipment, vehicles and chemicals. I recall that only half a year ago, the National Board of Trade, which I'm representing here today, was involved in the preparation of the bilateral joint committee meeting in Stockholm that was led by Secretary of Department of Industrial Policy and Promotion, Mr. Amitabh Kant from India. And here where intense discussions were held on the enhanced cooperation between India and Sweden. And it's therefore also a true pleasure for me to represent Sweden here today and have the opportunity to highlight the long-standing and important bilateral trade relationship between India and Sweden. For me and my colleague, it's also our first time in India, and we are struck and very touched by the warmth and hospitality we have already met on our first days here. But now to the subject for the coming minutes, focusing then on regulatory landscape in Sweden and how technical regulation supports it. The outline of my presentation is as follows. I will provide you some short details on the National Board of Trade. And then in order to provide some remarks on the Swedish regulatory landscape and national quality infrastructure, I feel obliged to spend some time on defining quality infrastructure and the important enablers of effective quality structures. In the end, I will finalize with some reflections on the new trade reality and how it affects regulatory landscape and the demands on quality infrastructures in the years to come. But first, some information about the National Board of Trade. The National Board of Trade is a governmental agency under the Ministry for Foreign Affairs in Sweden, specialized in trade policy, foreign trade, EU internal market, and technical assistance. The board has an independent role in providing the government with input, but it also, to some extent, functions as a think tank, providing input to the general trade policy debate. The mission for the board is free trade, open borders for goods, services, people, and capital. As the National Board of Trade is foremost an expert policy and analysis organization, you might wonder what our relevance is in the quality community. Well, the board has also a number of operative roles and is practically involved in trade policy. For example, the board is a central organization in Sweden analyzing technical regulations prepared by Swedish regulators. The board is also the Swedish TBT and notification inquiry point. And further, we are, for example, strongly engaged in technical assistance and capacity building in various projects around the world at developing just national quality infrastructures. Then now to some definition of quality infrastructure. As I see it, a quality infrastructure is constituted of all regulations, structures, and bodies that exist in a country and economy for supporting free trade on a fair market and to promote safe products and services on a sustainable society. The actors within the quality infrastructure could be classified in two main groups. The policymakers and specifiers, those who set the requirements, and then the performers, those who apply the system, like accreditors and certification bodies. The users are all economic operators on the market and consumers. And I think that you are all here as quality professionals very well known by the different actors in a national quality infrastructure, ranging from regulators to the market surveillance authorities. To build an efficient quality infrastructure is burdensome, as the process requires a number of essential institutions to be established nationally. We know all that setting up an organization and processes is only one part of the process. The real challenge lies in creating trust in the system and getting international acceptance, and an acceptance that will continue to improve according to the changes in society. I feel that one of the most important factors for an efficient and functioning quality infrastructure is political will and involvement. Therefore, also the regulating part of the political system is of crucial importance to enhance efficiency and functionality. If we then look at what guidance we have for national implementation of a quality infrastructure, I think a good starting point is the TBT agreement, the WTO obligations. And here I think that attention naturally should be put on the provisions of the TBT agreement, dealing with the preparation, adoption, and implementation of technical regulations and standards. The distinction between technical regulations and standards make it possible to establish a transparent international systems for eliminating technical barriers to trade. Further conformity assessment mechanisms used by WTO members should be robust enough to establish necessary confidence in the activities performed as part of conformity assessment procedures. I would like, however, to stay a little bit longer in highlighting the regulator's challenge. As you all know, the regulator's role is to secure the safety of citizens. If we look at regulators worldwide, we can see that the approach used by regulators might vary quite a bit when it comes to the degree of cooperation with other actors in the quality infrastructure. One of the greatest challenges regulators face is how to deal with the concept of risk, especially in relationship to fast technological development when writing technical regulations. And here I feel, of course, that voluntary standards and schemes could have a greater role to play. In many areas, there's still far to go, but this process requires really a change of work and work mode in order to accommodate the regulator's values in voluntary processes. What I mean here is that innovations bring new technologies and new products on the market. The governments finance some of these innovations, but regulators are almost never involved in the process of development. This in turn means that once an innovation becomes a product, the regulators is taken by surprise and needs to start considering health and safety issues related to innovations reactively. It's a future challenge for regulators to be proactive and work together with innovators to make sure that health and aspects and technical regulations and innovations work simultaneously. The same argument goes for standards. Standardization bodies need to consider generic performance standards as a better solution than specific product standards in order to keep up with the pace of innovators and new technologies. And I was especially happy to hear Mr. Croft's presentation this morning and the new concept of the new ISO standard, including the concept and risk-taking scenarios. Also, maintaining the voluntary character of standards and the mandatory character of technical regulations is another challenge. It is easy but dangerous way to go if standards were used as mandatory documents rather than voluntary solutions, giving presumption of conformity if and when appropriate and relevant. But then over to Sweden to give some Swedish reflections. I would say that a key facilitator for functioning Swedish trade has been the membership of the European Union. Having then the benefits of the internal market with a far-reaching technical harmonization of industrial products. that comprises a systematic structure for technical regulations, standards, conformity assessment procedures, and market surveillance. A common system for free movement of goods exists also for the non-harmonized area, applying the principle of mutual recognition. Non-harmonized product areas exist naturally in different member states, also so in Sweden, but these are effectively consulted on within the EU through the notification procedure existing in the Union, corresponding the notification procedure in the WTO, then in order to avoid barriers. In addition, of course, national cooperation and consultation methods, both formal and informal, are vital for supporting functioning national quality infrastructure. In practice, the preparation and adoption of new technical regulation in Sweden are covered by several legal acts. On one hand, we have the Swedish ordinance that implements international and European framework when it comes to the preparation, adoption, and implementation of technical regulations. On the other hand, we have the National Board of Trade regulation on technical rules that provides additional instructions for relevant authorities on how they should act when notifying technical regulations. Here I must underline that these consultations are preceded by detailed regulatory impact assessments that are required by national legislation and which of course must observe both EU and WTO commitments. Regulators must also naturally consult other regulators and all other stakeholders that are affected by the regulation that is in process. In this following slide, you can just see the regulatory landscape, where of course also the European administration has a big role to play for Sweden. And here just a picture of the main stakeholders in the Swedish national quality infrastructure, with the government offices, the independent regulatory authorities that are drafting technical regulations but also enforcing product safety on the market. The Swedish Board for Accreditation and Conformity Assessment as the main, the only accreditation body in Sweden that is also responsible for legal metrology and market surveillance coordination. And then the 3 national standardization bodies. And then the National Board of Trade like an intermediate between the different actors. I would like to finish with some remarks on the new trade reality and the significance of technical regulation in trade policy. The landscape where companies operate worldwide today is totally different than before. And it's constantly changing. From a situation where design, production, marketing, and sale was nationally focused, production is now divided in global value chains. And this new reality has also some significant effect on trade policies and regulatory policies. First of all, we see much more complex products. We see that products and services markets have been integrated in a manner which might not have been estimated by regulators. Just to give an example for 3D printing. Services and products are more and more integrated. New challenges are raised, for example, due to e-trade. And in general, that has already pointed out many times on this conclave, there's an increased awareness and knowledge between actors on product quality and safety. And this also results in increased requirements and expectations on product conformity by users. And new kinds of systems and structures are created that can verify and provide evidence for different parts of quality issues, such as environmental concerns, corporate responsibility, etc. And even if we can see that there are advanced forms of regulatory tools sophisticated methods for regulatory impact assessment, we cannot really say that technical barriers to trade would have become history. On the contrary, we can see that the trade concerns discussed in the TBT committee in the WTO are all increasing. And the development that I have already shown with the complexity of the products, new risk scenarios and concern will continue to put strains on countries around the world. Which developments are we then able to spot affecting the regulatory landscape and quality infrastructure from a trade policy perspective? First of all, we can see a trend where countries and markets are seeking for more effective solutions to address technical barriers to trade. For example, by negotiating new generation free trade agreements with far-reaching bilateral or regional, maybe also sectoral TBT commitments. We can naturally see that new regulatory challenges are to be addressed, especially related to technological development. For example, in the field of, as I had mentioned, products and services, environmental sustainability, national security, etc. And here I really see that the role of regulatory impact assessment and the invention of new flexible regulatory solutions will accentuate. What we also must observe, in my opinion, is that quality gaps might increase between countries. And this due to the constant need to develop regulatory requirements, and because all countries, all economies might not have the resources to upgrade competence, administration, structures, and equipment constantly. And in order to provide as many economies as possible the possibility to participate effectively in international trade, naturally a strong focus on technical assistance with a quality infrastructure and component will be essential. To sum up this by one sentence, I would say that improved regulatory cooperation will be essential in order to address barriers, costs for industry, and to promote free trade. By these remarks, I thank you sincerely for your attention. It's really a pleasure to be here today. Thank you.